I often ask my clients to go on what I call a judgment detox, a judgment detox of themselves first, because this is where self-kindness starts. Now, judgment exists for us to be able to make decisions, good, bad, right, wrong, true, not true, but that kind of black and white, good, bad thinking can get us into all sorts of trouble internally when we constantly kind of have the naughty stick out for ourselves. So how do you know if you need a judgment detox? Well, basically, if we have this, what we call the happiness trap, this kind of trap where we've got high standards for ourselves, way higher than anybody else would ever set. You know, your mother wouldn't ask you to set those standards, your partner, your best friend. We set these standards for ourselves and we're always feeling inadequate because we're never quite there with that standard. And so we're constantly judging the way that we look when we, stand in the mirror. We're constantly telling ourselves stories that we're never good enough. We're constantly sort of feel like we're running a race and we are the only ones with a whip out and there's no one else behind us. And we have a time story. This is a big indicator that you judge yourself quite harshly, is that you never feel that you have enough time and that you feel like you're running out of time. I know it's a big one, especially for women, because we have that body clock where there's a certain amount of ticks that we have to get on the list of life by a certain age or a certain time, or we don't feel good enough. And so what this leads to is a lot of what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong, and this constant judgment of ourselves with where we're at. So internally, it leads to a lot of unnecessary drama, unnecessary struggle, internal pain, because we've lost that ability to be our own biggest advocate or our own biggest friend. And we end up actually being less effective because we spend so much time feeling inadequate or not good about ourselves and less time actually just being effective and being able to pace ourselves, to be able to live a life that is fit for a human and not a robot. So we want to be able to still be effective without the whip out. And how is it that we get to where we want to go, but we actually still enjoy the ride, and that this friendship that we have with ourselves along the way actually stays intact? Because if we are in this mode of being our own sergeant, it's hijacking our happiness on a daily basis. If we have this, it's a naughty stick that you have out for yourself where it's like, that was bad, that was really bad, you should have done that better. And, and it's like having an army sergeant stand behind you, except it's you. And this, this hijacking of our own really true happiness, which happens in this relationship with ourselves. There are so many ways that we can build this relationship just by losing some of these habits that I want to discuss. So here's a couple of ways that you know that you've kind of you've become your own sergeant and you have this kind of whip out. Number one, you have a scorecard. You have a scorecard for yourself on a daily basis. I know so many people that go to sleep at night and they are scoring themselves good, bad, right, wrong, every single day. And the thing is about the human mind that's running that race and has to get where it has to go and has to achieve more and do better and progress and all of those things, is that the scorecard is usually made up of bads and you're not acknowledging your own wins. So if you fall asleep at the end of the day and you go through a list in your head of the ways, maybe I shouldn't have said that way, or I did that wrong today, or that wasn't fast enough, or that wasn't good enough, or I don't like the way that I spoke to my child, or I should have done this better at work, or, if you have a scorecard out you have to match the negative with some positive. So you have to acknowledge your small wins every day, because amongst all of the things that you feel that you didn't do fast enough, good enough, right enough, were all of these little things that you did acknowledge. Maybe you fed yourself. Maybe you exercised. Maybe you might have, said something in a grouchy tone to your children, but there are a million other things that you did that day that you did really well. And so the scorecard, we have to look at actually evening the playing field, so to speak. If you never say kind words to yourself, and even if you just start this as a practice at the end of the day, you are slowly losing this relationship with yourself. And then we wonder why we don't feel confident. We don't trust ourselves, which is the birthplace of confidence, because we're never actually acknowledging our wins, and we're never actually being kind to ourselves and saying things like, hey, you've got this. Hey, you did this today. Hey, it's okay. And it's in all of those words, which you get to say whenever you want to, that this relationship is rebuilt, which is really where true confidence and true self-trust and true happiness, internal happiness, starts to come from. So if you have the scorecard out, I want you to start evening that scorecard up with acknowledging, some of the awesomeness that you were today, alongside all of the bad that that you have at the end of the day. I want you to also acknowledge, this is what I did do. I got up, I got out of bed, I did my best. So if you feel like you're running a race and you are the start gun, you are the coach, you are the competitor, you are the judge at the finish line, and you feel like you're still not winning, then this judgment detox has to start. We have to start losing the judgment, because the other thing is that if you do this to yourself, there is a chance that you have the same standards for others. Not always, but when we're this hard on ourselves, it shows up externally. It shows up in the people that we're working with. It shows up with our children. It shows up with these judgments that we set, with this black and white thinking of good, bad, right, wrong. And that's just your mind trying to figure out how to navigate society and living in the world. But when we get caught up in what's right and wrong, rather than what is and what's helpful, what's kind, the right and the wrong, it starts to cause so much separation, first within ourselves and then with others, rather than what brings us closer to ourselves, what brings connection. So all I want you to do is I want you to even the playing field of this scorecard, just to bring back a little bit of self-kindness. Acknowledge what you did do. And when you hear those sneaky thoughts that are like a sergeant standing behind you, yelling in your ear, telling you all of the bads and the wrongs, I want you to actually pay attention to it when it's happening, because a lot of us are oblivious to how often that we're doing it. And maybe if you do this for a day, you will actually be shocked how many times, whether it's in the mirror, whether it's at the end of the day before you fall asleep, like how many times you are giving yourself a hard time. And so when you catch these sneaky, bitchy, nasty sergeant thoughts, I want you to just stop, and I actually want you to laugh. Because if we can't first stop and have the awareness that it's happening and start to have humor and laugh at the concept of my mind is just trying to keep me safe. It's trying to get me to do things right and wrong. Sorry, right, not wrong. Good, not bad. Rather than what's helpful. Laughing at that voice is helpful, because that voice, if it is dictating everything that you are doing, you're not being effective. You're not going to win the race. You're spending so much time buying into and giving meaning to good, bad, right, wrong, rather than focusing on what's helpful. If I want to be effective today, but also be human, if I want to show up as myself, as the greatest version of myself, what is helpful for me to do that? Because self-battery is not helpful. Self-kindness is. And it doesn't mean that we have to walk around patting ourselves on the back all of the time. If you are being a horrible person, then calling yourself out, making a judgment on it, taking responsibility for it is a good thing. This is for the people that genuinely are doing and giving so much good every day and are not acknowledging it. This is for you. So the scorecard, at the end of the day, I want you to just notice the little score that you have for your day, and I want you to even up the score a little bit with just a little bit of self-acknowledgement of some of the wins. And the second thing is throughout the day, every time that voice comes in with your bad and your wrong and giving yourself a hard time, I want you to call it out. This is the awareness is great, but it's only the first step. In future videos, I'm going to go into more steps, but you have to be able to call it out and actually laugh at it if it's not helpful. If it's helpful, use it. If it's not helpful, just laugh. And if you walk around laughing at yourself all day and everyone thinks you're mad, then that's totally fine. For a day, just see what happens if you just start to laugh at the judgment. And then go back to being helpful. What's helpful? If I want to be the greatest version of myself, what can I do in the next 2-3 minutes that's actually going to help me be that person? Try this, and I want to know exactly how you feel. Drop me a comment or shoot me a message if this is something that you feel that you really struggle with.